Call to order for a special Watertown City Council meeting for October 17th of 2023. Please rise while Councilman Schutte leads us in prayer.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this new day that we've been given, this new day to live and walk in the abilities that you've given us. And in this room, even in this room today now, we have men and women that have responsibilities of different sorts within this city to help lead this city. And I just pray that as we work through the capital improvement plan, as we work through the budgeting this week, as we work through these scenarios, continue to bind us together, work together and have a common vision and a common goal, and just pray your guidance and leading in this. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Finance Officer Bob Zine, please call the roll.
Okay. Danforth,
Here.
Pauline,
Here.
Jurens.
Here.
Okay. Peters.
Here.
Okay. Schutte,
Here.
Tupper,
Here.
Bueller. Here. Thank you.
Quorum is established. Chair will entertain a motion to approve today's agenda. Motion made by Councilman Schutte, seconded by Councilman Danforth. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now is the time for open forum. If there is anyone here who would like to address the council on something that is not on today's agenda, now is your time to do so. I'll close open forum, going straight into our business for the day, which is a presentation review, public input, and approval of the capital improvement plan for 2025 to 2029. We'll go to our city manager, Mac, for this presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I get into the presentation, I'd like to visit a little bit about process. What you have in front of you tonight is the proposed long-term capital plan for years 2025 through 2029. Should this body desire to make changes to this plan, I would recommend that it's done by a motion and second and a vote. And we will then take the approved changes and apply them to the plan and bring the plan for final approval at the second meeting in November when we finally approve the 2024 budget. We do have to have this approved by the end of November per our charter and per state statute.
City Manager Mack, I want to make something clear. Do you want these motions made today? I know that we can take them at the first reading as well, and we will have a first and second reading, will we not?
No,
No,
on the
just
long-term
one.
plan, we do not.
Okay.
It would be preferable to have them done today so that we can make the changes. And if you desire to have a second look at this at the first meeting in November, we can have it prepared for then.
Okay. I would tell council that I am not going to close off all discussion on the long-term capital plan today. So if an amendment comes to you or you're not quite certain today, this is not an all or nothing thing today. You will have time to bring forward an amendment and see if you can't get the council approval on that. And City Manager Mack and I have discussed that, and she's okay with that. It's just, if you know that you want to change something today, please bring it up so that the necessary changes can be made. Also, City Manager Mack, may I make something clear? Would you like questions to be addressed during the presentation?
I think that's probably best.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Councilman Peters and Councilman Jurens, I have my phone with me, so you can interrupt if you want. That is fine. If you know that you want to speak on something, if there's a discussion going on, you may text me and I will know and call on you. But otherwise, feel free to interrupt. City Manager Mack.
All right, thank you. What is included in the presentation today is a high-level overview of what is included in your CIP booklet. So in the booklet has all of the detail, all of the explanations. It also includes all of the replacement schedules that we operate under when looking at capital equipment and purchases. So if you have a question about that, it won't be in the presentation, but it's part of the discussion. So we'll get started. So what you have in front of you is the long-term plan, again, 2025 through 2029, and an estimated overview of capital expenditures for the next 5 years is $100,372,300. We've broken this down by function, which you can see. There's general government, public safety, public works, culture and recreation, and conservation and development. A large portion of that comes in the public works category, which is where our roads and bridges and public infrastructure is largely attributed to. 56% of the total budget that's being recommended is for general improvements. And here's just high level, again, overview of these, and we'll get into a little more detail a little further into the presentation. Projected revenues, as we're going through the budget process, we do look at where the dollars are going to and could potentially come from to fund projected projects. You'll see that we have several enterprise funds. We have our 212 fund. We also have the general fund and then our special revenue park and recreation funds. We also do see significant dollars coming from federal, state, and local grant opportunities. Questions on that? All right, so the way I've broken this down is by fund and by department. And again, this is just a high level. Just because there's not anything on the slide does not mean that there's nothing proposed in the budget. It's in your packet, and I have mine in front of me, and we can definitely talk through any questions you might have if there's nothing listed on the sheet. So first up in the general fund is our IT department. We're not recommending any significant new purchases. We have our normal.
City Manager Councilman Danforth has a question.
Okay.
Before we get going, so I understand where we're at as we look down the road, is there any factoring in here for inflation on numbers, or are they, the numbers that go out 5 years, are they a stagnant number? With the assumption at some point there's going to be inflation during that period of time? So is it today's dollars?
I think it varies by department who's submitting their requests. Some of them are automatically building in some inflation, and some of them are, it's a stagnant number, and as we get closer, we'll update the number. There's not a uniform way of doing that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So information technology, we do have, annually, we replace computers. We do some office licensing, networking, and fiber expansion. Any questions on IT? Okay. The police department, capital purchases. Of note, you'll see that we rotate our vehicles out every 3 years.
Councilman Shetty has a question, sorry.
Okay, it's all right.
Sorry, on the fiber optics, right? The new street department, potentially, as that plays out, is that in, I guess without looking too closely, is that in that plan?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Pete's nodding his head yes, so.
Peter Boyle, please just identify yourself.
Hi, Peter Boyle, IT Director. So the fiber run, right where the new street facility is going, is right next to the road, so it's not going to be much of a cost at all to get the new street facility on our fiber.
Councilman Tupper?
Just before we get into it too deep, on all the different departments, we have a typical schedule of replacement. Has there been any major changes in any of the replacement schedules in any department?
Not in my time here, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Police department, we do rotate our patrol vehicles out every 3 years, and you'll also notice that in 2025, we are anticipating purchasing a new armored car. Questions about PD?
If I might.
Councilman Beeler?
Thank you. Just a question, just out of curiosity, what do we put, typically, what is the mileage on a vehicle, a patrol car, in a year's time? Any idea?
Sure.
Chief Toomey?
Hi, Chief Toomey. We put on 36,000 approximately per year. about 3,000 miles per month.
Thanks. Thank you.
Councilman Tupper?
Typically on those at the end of 3 years, when you got around 100,000 or whatever, those get handed down into other departments, don't they typically?
Yep, we'll absorb them in either our own department or put them out for other departments. The reason it's 100,000 is because that's when the warranty wears out and the expenses start to get pretty costly.
Councilman Danforth?
The big ticket item, the armored vehicle, what do we have now? And why are we looking to replace that if it's a replacement?
So we have a 1997 International armored car from Rochester Armored Vehicles that was donated to us. It came in pretty rough shape. We put some money into it. It's got 500 and something thousand miles on it. The air conditioning doesn't work. It's really, it's a beast. So it is definitely due to get updated.
Follow up, Councilman?
Did they take it to the family reunion all the time? Or how does an armored vehicle get, is that one that was like a bank?
That's right.
Previous or something?
Yep,
And
it was
so
a-
that's how it got the miles.
Yep, it was an armored car that was given to us. We were trying to be conservative, and that's what we've been driving for the last, I don't even know how long. I think we've,
Only one previous owner, they drove it to the bank and back.
Yeah. Every day. So on that 285, is that all inclusive? Are there other costs that are going to go into that in regards to any telecommunications, any additional equipment that would go into that? Or is that a complete unit?
we tried to be as accurate as we can. There's going to be some additional costs, I'm sure, when we get to it for a mobile radio or those types of things, but that's a pretty close estimate according to Bearcat.
Councilman Beeler?
I'm good, thanks, Mayor.
Councilman Tupper?
Yeah, I think if we all remember right, I believe it was about 6 months ago that was discussed at a council meeting or a work session, I can't remember, that they would request that to go into the CIP. Was it about 6 months ago too?
It was about a year ago.
Oh, was it about a year
Because it
ago?
was in the CIP then.
But I do remember seeing the old one. I mean, I toured it. No, they didn't haul me away in it or nothing. But yeah, it's seen its better days. So,
Councilman Peters?
Thank you, Mayor. Quick question here as we're talking about these capital purchases. Are there federal grants available for purchases like this? And I apologize if this question is maybe a little bit ignorant. But as we're talking about these large one-time purchases that's going to hold us up for the next few years, is there any federal grants available that we could go after?
So there are grant dollars for different purchases. If we identify one that could be used for this particular purchase, we certainly would apply for it. We've not identified anyone specifically. The COPS grant that the city was awarded 4 years ago covered the addition of 3 police officers, but that would not be in the capital budget.
Any follow-up, Councilman Peters?
No, I think that's good. I guess I would just suggest and be a proponent of identifying any potential grants, but it sounds like you guys are on top of that, so thank you.
All right, thank you, Chief.
All right, the fire department. In 2025, we've got a new brush truck. In 2026, we have a new light rescue truck. 2027 is the big year for fire. We're looking at, oh, I spelled that wrong. I'm very sorry. Station 3 building at $4.5 million and a new ladder truck at $1.3 million. I suspect there'll be questions about this, so I'll pause.
Councilman Danforth?
Thank you. On the brush, I'm going to kind of go through this a little bit here, but I don't see, if I looked on here, I didn't see on the replacement where it specifically talked about the replacement period for brush trucks. I think as we get, well, for example, the ladder truck. How old are those vehicles that we have now? What's our basis for replacement other than time?
Assistant Chief Youngblood can answer that.
Turn this on. Assistant Chief Scott Jim Lloyd, Watertown Fire Rescue. The fire trucks are on a 20-year replacement. So the aerial that we're looking to replace is a 2007. So at that time, it'll be 20 years old. And the brush truck is currently one that we're replacing as a 1999. So it is already right at that level as well.
Seeing how you're up there, the Station 3, which has also been referred to as the East Side Fire Station, or whatever we want to call it, first response fire station. Amanda, we had a discussion the other day about, where does that really fit in regards to need? Want is one thing, need is another, and I believe you were referencing performance standards and how we're performing against that as part of at least a level of detail and consideration for a Station 3 facility, East Side facility. Assistant Chief or Ms. Mack, can you elaborate on that? I mean, right now, we've got it on the 2027. Does that change? Does that outlook change 4 years from now from what I heard stated the other day?
So my comments the other day were just that. When we look at where we place, large ticket items on the CIP, the Station 3 has been a desire of this community for quite some time, clearly prior to my coming here. The need for that is based off of growth in population and what we anticipate for growth in population on the east side of the community. We've not reached those numbers yet. I think it's the NFPA, am I getting that acronym right? That sets the what we would consider standards for response times, both for first responders and fire calls, and we're currently meeting those. Would it be great to exceed them? Absolutely. But when you balance that with some of the other more emergent needs that I think we have as a community, and this is a discussion we've had as a leadership team my entire time here at the council with the city of Watertown. It's a need. I would not put it as an emergent need, but keeping it in the long-term plan keeps it relevant, keeps it in the forefront of our conversations. And as we are able to check some of these larger ticketed items off, makes it more attainable. Having it now would be nice because it would help us exceed the standards, and we want to exceed. We want to be excellent in what we do, but the funding becomes a real challenge. The other issue with Station 3, as we've talked about my entire time here, is the staffing of it. And so we may have to be very creative in how we staff that. Perhaps it's a staged approach where it is an ambulance bay, and we're utilizing existing staff, and we're doing brownouts and blackouts with the other stations. Perhaps it's an addition of one or two new firefighter paramedics at a time, and phasing that in over multiple years. To add 6 new firefighters, which for a full-fledged station is what the standard would be, is about $700,000 to the general fund, which is a significant dollar amount. So keeping it in the plan, I think, is important. I am of the professional opinion that it is an important thing for our community to continue planning for, but it does not need to happen next year.
Follow-up, Councilman Danforth?
Yeah, just when we talk about the standards, are we talking about for fire response? Are we talking about emergency, meaning ambulatory type response? Or is it, because we have a combined, fire rescue, is it some combined standard?
So the NFPA is fire response. There's some other metrics for ambulance response, and I think we're using sort of a combination of both of those to help set metrics for response times.
How do we fare with the ambulance standard? response. I apologize for that tough
No, it's
question,
a-
but it's a big issue. And
Good question. I was just wanted to make sure I formulate the answer quick. For the ambulance, we mostly run off of our guidance off the American Heart Association, and their recommendation is for every minute for survivability of a cardiac arrest decreases by 10%. So for every minute we can get an ambulance or advanced life support savings there, systems there, your increase of that event goes up 10%.
Councilman Beeler?
Assistant Chief, question for you. What do we estimate the square footage for that facility to be, the full facility? Are we, and also I'll ask this question, are we basing the cost on what we've seen with the past experiences with building fire stations?
So I don't know the exact square foot, but we're looking at a 3 bay, one for an ambulance, one for a fire truck, and then one for an auxiliary storage, might be one of our response trailers or one of the brush trucks it could be, and then living quarters for staff is a minimum. I think that portion of the building was at 5,000 square feet, and I don't remember the exact square footage of what the truck bay was for.
Do you think it'd exceed 10,000 square feet for a building?
You know, Bruce, I'd love to give you excuse me, Councilman Bueller, I'd love to give you the perfect answer on that. I don't know the numbers right off the top of my head.
No, the only reason I'm asking that, I just wonder if we've got enough money in place there, because if we're at, by today's dollars, you're probably looking at $450 a square foot. I would say at least, and that would get you a 10,000 square foot facility.
I can speak to that a little bit. The first budget I prepared in 2022, it was slated, Chief Rowland had put 1.5 million in there. And as we were seeing costs increase with the ice arena and other projects we were working on, we increased it to that 4.5. What does need to happen, and this is not a capital discussion, is we need to conduct a feasibility study and really hone in on what the actual needs for this facility are, where it's going to be located. A little bit like we're doing with the street facility. What's it going to look like? Where's it going to go? Here are some real costs associated with it. It's also why it's in year 3 of the capital improvement plan, so it gives us time to fully assess what those needs are going to be.
I guess at the end of the day, I think it's more than likely would cost a hell of a lot more than that down the road. So I think we need to look at that pretty close when we're looking at size and what our needs are and budgeting.
I mean, if you'd like us to amend the amount, we certainly can if that's the desire of the council.
Well, I just want to make sure we've got a realistic amount that we're looking at budgeting for, that's all. And how we arrive at that, I'm not sure, but I would say, like I say, by today's, you'd be looking at a 10,000 square foot facility likely, and I don't know if that would be sufficient for what we need. I don't know.
Councilman Tupper?
I think if we look back, and I may be wrong on these dates, but I think when we originally looked at it, it was on a 24-25 CIP. That was before your time, Amanda, or City Manager Mack. I've sat in on numerous planning meetings on this. A lot of the things I look at, for one thing, if you look at the city of Watertown right now, our largest daytime population is in the east part of Watertown, by far. If you go back to Assistant Chief's comment about time with an ambulance, you say you gain 10%, but you also, on the other hand, you lose 10% if you're going the other direction. If it's taking us an extra 5 minutes. A house fire will double in size every minute. So there is a very big importance to this. So Bruce, or Councilman Bueller, I don't know if we need to change a number. My wish is just to make sure we keep it on the radar and see it get done. If a couple years from now, things change with our economy and things start looking better, I'd like to see it moved up to 25, but at this time I will agree that it has to be put back at 27. But there is definitely a need. Like I say, I've sat through many of those strategic planning meetings on this building, and like I say, the biggest thing is we could have built it 5 years ago. We couldn't figure out how to staff it. So.
Councilman Beeler?
I certainly don't argue the point that we need it. I just, especially Danforth and I, we're right up there. We need an ambulance right now if we need one. But all I want to say is that, no, I don't dispute the fact that we need it. I just want to make sure, and to Councilman Tupper's point, I just want to make sure that we've got the most realistic dollar amount we can have. That's a pile of money we're looking at out there. And so there's got to be some sort of justification to get to that number. So I think we need to get as accurate as, and if it's $4.5 million and that's accurate, great. But I just question that. I don't know if 10,000 square feet would be sufficient.
I think now would be a appropriate time, since Councilman Beeler mentioned the overall economy and you mentioned the construction costs and Councilman Tupper mentioned the economy. I want to remind the people in the community, I think everyone in this room knows this, but one of the important parts of this is a plan, okay? This does not mean this automatically happens, nor for the amount of money budgeted, because there's the old military saying that no plan survives first contact with the enemy, and the enemy in this case is the overall national and worldwide economy. And we do the best that we can to plan looking forward, but we also have to stay flexible with our priorities and what we can do with what we have. So I just want to remind people of that, which I think almost everyone does know, but it's not bad to just remind everyone. So City Manager Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. Moving on, with the fire department, we also have the ambulance. And as you'll see in years 25, 27, and 29, we are replacing an ambulance.
And I see Assistant Chief Youngblood had his people come by at the exact right time. Always seems to
I didn't
happen.
call that up. I mean, divine timing, right?
It's amazing how there's always an emergency whenever we're talking about Watertown Fire Rescue budget. All right.
Anyway, moving on to the ambulance, very typical capital expenditures from what we normally do. You may recall that we've asked council to pre-authorize purchase of ambulances because the lead time to build these things is extending out several years in some cases. I should make note that there may be other items within the CIP once it's approved that we may come to you and ask for pre-authorization just so we can get in line to get them ordered, get the parts made, things like that. Any questions about ambulances?
Councilman Danforth?
Each one is referenced as Medic 3. What is,
Go ahead.
do we read number them or something all the time, or how does that work?
I think that's a typo. As the ambulance ages out, we replace that ambulance. So when Medic 1 is 10 years old, we replace Medic 1, Medic 3
It
is 10.
stays
and so
Medic
forth.
1 then?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I thought this one's not lasting very long. So.
Councilman Beeler?
Thanks, Mayor. Assistant Chief, another question. Do we need to, and this might be for you as well, City Manager Mack, do we need to use CIP funds for rebuilds like we do with ambulances, the rebuild of the cab part of the?
Yeah.
Does that fall into this same category?
It would, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Councilman Danforth?
Yep, thanks, Mayor. Several years ago, we were, with our ambulances, they weren't equipped exactly the same. Has that changed? I know at one point, I personally had an experience out by the lake that just became, it hit home that we needed to budget, and these things all need to be situated with equipment properly. Has that changed? Are we doing that now on an ongoing basis?
Yes, it is. The instance you were talking about is when we were looking to add equipment. It was very expensive. It was the Lucas compression machine for CPR. That, when we were looking for the time, we were trying to slowly build that, and that's when you went through the process of making sure we had them all the same. So all of our ambulances are equipped exactly the same, and we try to keep that standard. Obviously, when we have major new purchases with that equipment, we try to stage it to be conscious of the budget, but it is nice to have them all the same to provide the equal amount of service on every call.
Councilman Beeler?
Another question for you, Assistant Chief. What are our intentions for purchasing any rebuilds? I don't know, I don't see that on here, but where are we at with that? Ambulance rebuilds.
We're not planning to purchase any rebuilds. These are all new models.
And may I ask why we're not doing that? We've done it in the past and we had good success. We saved a lot of money. Why? And in some instances, I know that we had chassis that needed to be replaced, but I don't see that in here. And I know we were doing that. I know it was working well. So I'm curious about that.
In my conversations with the fire chief, and I don't want to speak for him because he's not here, they didn't work as well as they had hoped that they would. And so it was his recommendation for these, and that's what we're moving forward. If you'd like to see something different, we can certainly go back and bring that back.
I guess, Councilman Beeler?
Yes, I'd like to hear what we had issues with, because this is first I've heard from what you're saying right now.
I can't speak to it.
all I've
I
heard-
wasn't here. I don't know.
No, that's fine. But all I heard in the past was they worked out very well. They did a really, really good job, and they saved us a lot of money, thousands and thousands of dollars. So I hope we can investigate that a little bit further. Thanks.
Assistant Chief Youngblood, go ahead.
Councilman Bueller, the remount we did at that time, the remount came back, it looked nice, but it was not comparable to the units we had. We actually had some loss of services and capabilities in that ambulance versus our new one. The technology did not muster up to the same of what we had. And I believe one of those that's on there, I believe it's the 2027 one, is the one that's the remount that will be replaced at that time frame. So you're correct, there was a dollar savings, but and when it all came back to it, the dollar savings was not that much. And the quality of the ambulance of that one compared to the ones that were prior to that and since then is not the same.
All right.
Okay. Anything else on that?
City Manager Mack?
All right. Moving on, Public Works Department, the Engineering Division. All you see in here, really of note, are 2 new vehicles, one in 2026 and one in 2028. Any questions about that? Okay. Moving on, in the general fund, we have the street maintenance. I put snow removal, but this is the street division. My apologies. 2025, we have a new motor grader and 2 dump trucks. 2026, we have a motor grader and 2 dump trucks. Also, the cold storage building, which we've discussed with the street facility project. 2027 is a motor grader, 2028 is a motor grader, and 2029 is a plow truck. I will pause for questions.
City Manager Mack, I don't see, in 2025 in the material that we were given, it has the sand salt building in 2025, and I don't see that on that list.
What happened to it? It was in here, I promise. Yeah, I apologize. It didn't make it into the presentation, but it is, the sand salt building is $2 million in 2025. What I think happened is I copied the snow removal page, sorry, in your packet. In 2025, for the street division, we have the sand salt building for $2 million, a front-end wheel loader for $329, and a sweeper for 410. In 2026, we have the front-end loader and attachments, the tandem axle dump truck, and the cold storage building for 3.5 million. In 2027, we have the sweeper for 433,000, and we have the fuel station and scale for the street facility for 500,000. In 2028, we have the front-end wheel loader and attachments for 360,000. And in 2029, we have the spray patcher for 300,000. I apologize that the slide is wrong.
It's okay. I just wanted to mention that. In
Yeah.
part, I don't want to get us derailed on what's happening now versus what might be happening in the future, but in the presentation, talking about the new street department facility, the cost was 21 million, and then the two outbuildings were mentioned as possibly coming sometime in the future. And then I see that they're actually not only possibly coming, but they're actually scheduled to come. And I guess my thought is, if they're scheduled to come and I know this is just a potential, so it might not actually come to pass, but at the same time, I think it's good to discuss the full extent of the project upon completion and not just in stages, because I guess I will look more at the street department proposal to make sure how important these buildings are, because if they're absolutely vital and they are going to for sure come up in 25 and 26, then we should just build that into the proposal and be honest with the people of Watertown. And then also with ourselves, because we've got some hard budgeting to do. But like I said,
It's certainly an option
yeah.
to wrap those into the phase one. You remember when we discussed the street facility March, when we were doing public discussions about a potential joint facility. We laid the total cost out at that time and also indicated at that time a fiscal phasing plan, which included the sand salt building coming in year 25 and the cold storage building coming in year 26. I would say, and our public works director can chime in if I'm wrong, the sand salt building is definitely going to be needed once the main building is done. The others, the cold storage building, the fuel station, and the scale, certainly are needs, but are not emergent needs. So if you desire to move those, that's well within your purview. You just got to tell us where you want it. There's nothing to say either that you can't approve the CIP, and as we go through funding options and solutions for the street facility in City Hall, there's nothing to say that you can't amend it and say we're no longer going to take these components out of the 212. We're going to wrap it all into, we're just going to get it done in one fell swoop. That also is doable. What we've presented as it relates to the street facility and now the CIP is what we think is a fiscally responsible way to get the most critical component of that facility done, which is the heated storage and the office space, and then plan for the other pieces of it.
Councilman Danforth?
Yeah, I know from my perspective, and Mayor, I think I understand, I don't, if I hear you right, you're not suggesting necessarily that all get pushed into together as a phase one. You're just saying descriptively, from the project standpoint, it should have been all inclusive. Is that what I heard from you?
Yeah, pretty much, yes.
Okay. Well, you know, the one thing, and going through this process is always interesting. And I think one of the things that I've found in the past is that, number one, sometimes it's hard when we're doing it just snapshot by snapshot by snapshot. You know, sometimes you get later on and wonder, well, how come that's later than something that we already talked about earlier? So there's some of that give and take that will come. But I also think there's the whole other element of this at times is when we get into this, when we get into the performance of each individual department's budget, which may or may not have an impact on what we decide from a CIP standpoint. So anyway, this is our starting point. I know personally, I will not be ready to say today, this is what I'm going to agree to in the end. But it's a great start, and I will do my homework like I normally do. I got all these little sticky notes that I'll bring up questions with. But anyway, I do appreciate that. So.
And I mean, I don't want to jump in front of anyone else if they're going to say something, but I am almost raising that concern more for what we're doing now with the proposed $21 million street department as opposed to the 2025 sand salt building. But if you're saying this absolutely has to be part of the facility once it's up and running, then I'm just going to dig a little bit more into why is it just not in the proposal right now? Because I guess part of my interest is how large of a project is this? I mean, it's $2 million because what is the name of that where it's the activation cost just for on-site cost? Just what's that?
Mobilization.
Mobilization costs. Thank you, because that's a percentage of any project, and if we're already going to be paying mobilization costs, why pay them twice for something if we know we're going to do it? It's just I know that would only be a couple $10,000, but that's not
Those are all,
something we should
I
be
mean,
flippant about.
Those are all very fair points. And to your earlier point, it's a plan. It's a recommended plan. It's not one that you all have adopted. And again, when we are looking at the totality of these projects, we're looking at ways to get them done, because that has been a clear desire of the council and of the community, but get them done in a way that doesn't overtax our financial position. You know, when we've talked about the street facility in City Hall, we've talked about additional bonding to cover that. And what that might look like, we're not sure yet. We're still working on information for you all. But taking components that are that it's easy to unplug from the main function of the facility is what we're looking at. So for example, when we looked at the bid for Wells Fargo, what's an easy thing to unplug from that and perhaps do at a later time? The council chambers. That's what we've done with the street facility. Again, there's nothing to say that you all can't make a decision that says, we're just going to get it all done at once. We're going to bite the bullet and do it. And then that gives us another $5.5 million within the CIP to apply to other things that may come up. So.
Okay. I wouldn't look at it as it gives us $5.5 million more for the CIP. I would say it takes 5.5 away from what we're doing now and still puts us on a payment schedule for it. But anyway, I'm not. I don't want to.
It frees up 5.5 because all of these dollars have to be allocated, right? So even though it's a plan and it can be changed, we're anticipating that over the next 5 years we are spending roughly $100 million on capital improvements. That's a real dollar. Where we shuffle it within there, and again, it's based off of our projected revenues, which we budget very conservatively, again, at that 3% growth. So we may have another gangbuster year, and there may be more dollars to go around in the unrestricted fund. We may have an incredibly tight year where growth actually comes in at 2%. And so again, this plan allows us the flexibility to shift where we need to. But if you, to your point, if we did debt or additional bonding to do the street facility all at once, yes, the payment would come out of the 212 fund, but that payment will not be $5.5 million. So it does free up those dollars it frees up the spending authority to do other things.
I like how you say it better that way.
I'll work on my words for next
spending
time.
authority. It doesn't.
Well, that's really
I know.
what the CIP and the budget is. It's spending authority. It's saying we're giving you, the city, the authority to spend X amount of dollars. And if you want to spend more than that, you have to take additional action. So, anything else on that? Sorry. if you want to, feel free. Yeah, if you want to go ahead.
As far as the need or the priorities, Council and Mayor, I can speak to that here briefly. The salt sand shed is what I would call a high priority. That's why we have it slated immediately after the heated storage in the administrative offices. Without that, we simply can't store our winter road treatment materials on site. The only other salt sand shed we have is at the current facility. So once the heated storage and admin building are built, we'd have to truck across town to the old facility to load out salt and sand. It has to be protected under a dome or you lose the material because of the salt that exists in that mixture. So it's got to be out of the elements, out of the rain and snow and everything that we get in the fall and winter months. So that one's a high priority. It could be included in phase one, but again, this is a phased financial timeline that's really a lot the same as we've been presenting even back to when we talked about a city complex. We talked about how these could be phased in over a financial way that made sense to get them funded. And these buildings, I think, might have been the exact same years as they are shown right here, 25 and 26. For the salt sand shed and the cold storage building. The cold storage building is less of a necessity, but still something that would serve the street division well. The heated storage facility at, I think it was 34,000 square feet, doesn't quite fit all the equipment in it. So the cold storage would be used to house the rest of the equipment that can't fit in the heated storage. Some of that equipment use, of course, is seasonal, so things that don't need to be heated in the winter can go out in the cold storage, and then vice versa. The winter equipment that we're not using in the summer can sit out in the cold storage while the active equipment is in the main building. But it gets the rest of the equipment out of the elements and prolongs the life of our trucks and graders and payloaders and things of that nature.
All right.
Anything
Back
else
to
on
you.
that? Okay, thank you. So now moving on to snow removal. Again, I apologize. You can ignore the cold storage building on this slide. Everything else is accurate. We have motor graders, dump trucks, motor graders, and a plow truck. You will see in the proposed 2024 budget a couple of pieces of equipment that we're proposing leasing again. We have found that to work pretty well for us. And again, we have to account for those lease payments, but it's not a $500,000 hit to the budget annually. Any questions about that?
Councilman Shetty?
Thank you, Mayor. So just for me, just for clarification, and maybe it's obvious to others, but is this replacement, when we go, we're backing up a sheet to the 212 capitals, we're talking about the street department there. You had mentioned, Director Von Eye, that there's only so much room in the heated storage, and then that's why we need the cold storage. Some of these items that are on the list for like a sweeper in 2027, or are those replacement? Those are replacement, right?
Yeah, a vast majority of the equipment on here is all replacement.
We're not adding any more equipment as the city, my thought was the city does grow, I mean, down the road, is that building gonna be large enough if it's just for what we have now? It's not really designed for growth? Or is it designed for growth, the heated storage part?
Yeah, that's one of the budgetary constraints we're definitely up against. That's a real issue. And the estimate we showed at the work session last week at that just shy of 22 million does not give us a lot of room for growth. But we know that we're up against some real numbers, some real dollars that are adding up in a hurry. So we're trying to maximize that space as much as we can while designing it so that it is an expandable building. So if in 10, 20 years we want to expand it, it's doable in an easy way from an architectural standpoint. So we're definitely cognizant of those issues in that planning ahead and looking for room for growth. We'd love to build this thing out at 40+ thousand square feet, but we just simply, the numbers just get too astronomical for us to consider that a reality.
Follow up?
Yeah, and thank you, because that's right, I do remember that now, there was the addition, future addition. So the cold storage building at 3.5 million, I guess is my thought on there. If that, let's just say if that were to play out in 2026, I wonder what the difference is just to have the current building. How much more does it cost to make the heated storage larger? You know, is it 3 million more and now you just have a bigger heated storage building? Or do we have a separate, does it cost more to have a separate building versus, if we know in 2 years, we may be doing a separate building versus just making the building larger? Just a thought that I had.
I don't know the exact ratio, but there's definitely a significant savings on the cold storage construction side. It's essentially a pole barn with a concrete floor in it. Whether it's half the price, I can't speak to that off the top of my head, but you are getting a lot more square footage for your dollar on that cold storage shed than you would be adding on to the heated storage.
Councilman Beeler?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question as well in regards to the motor grader. Are these, the motor graders, are these all replacements? Is that what we're looking at here?
Yes.
Yes, as far as I know, these are all replacements.
Okay. And then are we adding any of these? Are we anticipating adding any for any issues that might come up that we think are going to come up with some of our contractors that we don't think we're going to be able to use anymore? My understanding was we're struggling to keep those people going.
We have not budgeted for any additional to replace contractors yet at this point, no.
Okay. And then I noticed too, there's not a, unless I'm missing it somewhere, because I could be, I don't see where we have a schedule for motor graders on here for replacement.
Yeah, if I could speak to that schedule real briefly. Blades would be the motor graders, that's 10 years on those. But those schedules, I did want to speak to that briefly if I could, Manager Mack.
Sure.
We are, what I would say, in a high level of need for a good fleet maintenance program. Some of these numbers, in my view, are very arbitrary and not at all near today's standards for a public works centralized fleet program. I was looking and glancing through here, and even in the park and rec section, I think their pickup replacement is 15 years. If you look at any healthy centralized fleet management program, you would not be holding on to a pickup for 15 years. You'd be rolling that piece of equipment out in a more timely manner so that you can rake back whatever value is left in it. And there's a breaking point there, obviously, for the return on your investment, that by the time you trade that in, you're getting enough back out of it that it lessens the cost of the new one. And right now, we're milking everything for all it's worth, and we're getting $500 out of it at the end because the tires barely turn. The city manager, Matt, can share some pictures with you, but we traded in one of those vehicles today on one of the new ones that the council authorized it to get this year. And you'll see what I'm talking about when you see those pictures of that vehicle. They're in pretty dire straits in some of these conditions. Long story short is, what we would like to do, and something Manager Mack and I have been talking about, is working towards a centralized fleet management program and getting these replacement schedules updated to a more standardized schedule that really makes sense and are really leveraging the dollars of the community a lot further than what they are right now.
Councilman Shetty?
Thank you, Mayor. And just so you know, behind you, there's agreement behind you as well with some people that, and I say that because I understand that concept, and I appreciate you guys working towards improving that.
Councilman Danforth?
Thank you, Mayor. We have 4 motor graders, 25 through 28. How many total do we have in this department?
You know, I don't have that exact number right off the top of my head, and Superintendent Bainan, I don't believe, is here tonight, but I can definitely get that to you.
Hey, because what I'm looking at is, you know, we try to get some kind of a staggering that of these replacements, and these are consecutively replaced year after year after year, and very large ticket items. I was just curious as to, you know, how many we have and what does that mean? And it'd be nice if they were every other year versus 4 consecutive years, because then I really don't know what comes in year 2029 on. But if we have 10 units and it's they last 10 years when we're going to replace one every year. So I was curious as to what that, how many do we have, and how did we get to the point where we're in that consecutive mode versus maybe some type of staggered type replacement schedule?
Yeah, I think that that rotation you're talking about, Councilman Danforth, is exactly part of what that fleet maintenance program would look like. If we go to a centralized fleet maintenance program, every piece of equipment in the city would be put into that program, and it would be looked at holistically as far as the schedules on when they're replaced. And when you have a group of motor graders, for example, we'd look at those and they'd get put into that program in a way that is alternating, that makes sense. So you're not getting hit repeatedly with a huge expense like that. So that too would be a component of what I spoke to a minute ago, once we get to that point with our fleet.
One thing to remember is that this is the first year that capital purchases such as motor graders have been able to come out of the capital improvement plan. They, prior to that, have all been in the general fund, which again makes it tight. I think I mentioned for the 2023 budget, we cut about $1 million worth of equipment requests out of there. So some of it is just not keeping up with the even the 10-year rotation, and trying to play catch up a little bit now that we've balanced out the funding sources for those.
Councilman Tupper? Oh, did you have a follow-up, Councilman?
Slightly different topic. So.
Okay.
Public Works Director Von I. We made comment earlier, and maybe you don't have the answer to this, but I would hope you do because of the, you're kind of in control of the street department. But I know we talked about leasing some equipment and that we have. Do you have any idea what that was? And
Yes, I do. On order right now is a new street sweeper and one, if not two, payloaders that we entered into a lease contract with earlier this year. Slated for next year with certainty is another payloader that we're looking to do a lease on. And do you recall, Manager Mack?
2 dump trucks.
And dump truck purchases as well for '24. So that's what we've worked out with the lease programs to this point.
a lot of those lease programs are like 3 or 4 year old or 5 year old lease programs, and a lot of that heavy equipment. And I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I'm probably 99% sure, I do believe the street department of Sioux Falls leases all their motor graders.
I've heard that as well.
They're in a rotation. I believe they got like 80 of them or whatever it is, but that lease program works out pretty good. You know, that kind of takes care of a lot of the, you know, when something gets 8, 10 years old, there's a lot of maintenance to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the lease program is just, I think we really need to look into that lease program with some of the bigger equipment a little bit more than what we have. I'm very happy that we've started that, but, you know, check with some other communities and see what they do with their, especially the big ticket items like front end loaders and graders and stuff, because I think it's well worth the dollars. So.
Yeah, we certainly have been doing that. We continue to do that. There's a recommendation in the 2024 budget to lease some pieces of equipment. Our leases that we are currently in are 7-year. Also, because it's a team effort, I just got a text message that we have 6 motor graders at the street division, 1 at landfill, and 1 at the airport. So there are 8 total.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Councilman Danforth.
Thank you again, Mayor. Couple, I think this would be a Kristen question, but then I have others for you as well. But are the lease expenses treated the same financially for us in regards to where those funds can come from as versus a purchase? I know in our private business, they're handled separately. They're I think tax purposes or whatever. So are they, you know, if you lease, it can still come out of our CIP?
Yeah.
It can.
Yeah, so they're treated the same way our debt payments are. So they're actually shown in the debt portion, the debt service portion, because that's how they're kind of treated for us is a debt service, essentially, in the capital improvement fund.
Okay. So my follow-up question on that item, and then I have one more question, is if we have pieces of equipment where that has proven to be beneficial to us, why wouldn't more of that be beneficial to us? And I think that's what Councilman Tupper is probably referring to. But if it's a good thing, why wouldn't we do more of that versus the actual purchase of this equipment?
I believe we intend to do more of that. I don't want to speak for Manager Mack or Kristen, Finance Officer Bobzine, but let's say any one of these items on here, one of the loaders, one of the motor graders, we want to purchase through a lease option or just flat out lease it for 5 years. Nonetheless, that total gross amount we need to spend in some window of time needs to be accounted for, and I think that's why these numbers show what they do.
But
It's also, sometimes when councils change, it's a changing philosophy of the council. I can't speak to my time here before, but there was a general feeling that the councils before, whomever that might be, were not terribly receptive to leasing, that they thought we needed to own. That changes over time. You all felt that that was a prudent move, so we'll continue to bring those opportunities forward when it makes sense. There's some smaller pieces of equipment that it probably makes more sense for us just to own them outright. So we're, again, trying to balance the financial need, the desire of the council, the philosophy of the council, and what makes sense to keep on hand rather than turning over every 7 years.
Are you waving at me? Or Did you have a comment? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the only thing that I was going to say is, to Manager Mack's point, is if the council does want to go down that conversation of lease, it probably does make sense to pull these out of this and have a whole section that is just lease. That is our equipment, because that would kind of show a difference in the dollars that we're spending, essentially.
Because I know in my world, we used to do an analysis and a comparison that said, okay, if we buy it, here it is. If we lease it, here it is. And so we would say it's a 5-year, 7-year lease, or a lifespan of 10 years, or whatever it is. And so we would show that so we could make make a decision based on what those numbers look like. And so that would be good for us to see that. At least I'd like to see that as a council, because there's, sometimes there's some good programs out there that leasing's the right answer, and sometimes it's not. But I got one last question on this topic, I think. Ms. Mack, you said that, because we made a change to our ordinance a while ago that enabled certain items to be eliminated from the
General fund.
and placed in the CIP
Correct.
dollars, correct?
Correct.
Do we know, with your proposed budgets here between the two of them, what impact, what dollars got shifted?
I
total?
don't have that here, but we can definitely get that. That's
It'd be
an easy.
interesting to know that.
Because we allowed for any equipment over $25,000 to come out of the CIP. So we can, in 2024, about $1.2 million shifted from the general fund into the. So it's a team effort,
He is
man.
so good.
It's a team effort.
But it's
So,
good for us
yeah.
to know that, so we understand the repercussion, or the not repercussion, the cause and effect of our ordinance change, so. Okay,
Well,
thank you.
and to your earlier point, and you've been singing our fleet maintenance program language, for the last few minutes. Again, when those items are required to come out of the general fund, it makes budgeting incredibly difficult because you're balancing personnel against equipment. Where when it comes out of the CIP, it allows you to be more strategic in not only the purchases that you're making, but the work that you're doing over the course of those 5 years. So it is a process. We're still working to build a CIP that provides a level of detail I think that we all want and becomes more systematic. While it is a plan and it's a guide, it really should be the standard, barring any sort of, unintended consequences or unforeseen circumstances that come up year over year, it should be pretty systematic, and that takes time to build. I know we have a couple of departments who map out a 10-year CIP. We don't present 10-year, but they know, hey, I got this coming, I think in year 8. It's on the horizon, but I'm going to just plan for it in year 10. One of the conversations we've had internally is moving this to a 10-year plan. Again, sometimes you don't have funding identified in years 8, 9, and 10, but you certainly are doing a better job at forecasting what the long-term needs as it relates to capital are. Again, it just takes time. So,
Councilman Beeler?
Thanks, Mayor. Just a comment, I was involved many times with discussions about leasing equipment. One was certainly the airport. We were looking at leasing a de-icing machine there. I don't know whatever happened with that, but I do think that if we do have a maintenance facility, I think that would have a bearing on our decisions too, moving forward with what we would want to lease versus purchase. But I think it definitely is worth a look at.
anything else on that? Okay. All right, we're moving on to the Park and Recreation Parks Division Cemetery. Very systematic. We've got each year about $100,000 slated for improvement of the cemetery roads. In 2026, you'll see the purchase of a backhoe. And in 2027, the addition of a cold storage building. Questions about that?
Councilman Beeler?
Yes, I do have a question. Thank you. And I'm glad to see that we're looking at a cold storage building. I had the opportunity to go visit out there because one of these days I'm going to kick the bucket. And
We don't like to think about that day, Bruce, so let's not talk about it.
I don't like to think about it either. But anyway, so I got a tour, and I was sort of disappointed in what I saw there. I think I don't see it in the budget, but I think it's something worth looking at sometime here in the near future is some sort of a replacement. And I see our Parks and Recreation Director Rodick coming to the stand. But I really think it's that we need to take a look at what we've got. Maybe we need to replace that building out there. That's for a better term, it's a dump.
I don't disagree. Oh, wait a second. Oh, I don't disagree. Earlier in the summer, I was made more of aware of the condition of that office area. And I still have not got a clear answer of whether that's on a historic registry. But first thing we'd like to do is explore if there's renovation possibilities for that and whether that makes sense to, restore that if it does have any historical significance. If not, then we would look at a plan to, revamp that office area through new construction.
Yeah, I would certainly suggest that we do something there.
Had not, gone down that road and really didn't have any concrete numbers before this was submitted, but, if we determine that's a higher priority, we may, let's say take a year off on the road reconstruction and apply that towards, an office.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Councilman Danforth?
I want to make a comment about the cemetery. I drive by that all the time, and I just want to say, I don't know who specifically works there, but I'm always impressed with the quality of that cemetery and how nice it looks. I really am. They do a wonderful job.
They do, and to put that in perspective, Tom Weeks is the cemetery supervisor out there, and to put that in perspective, in my past, I was in Kearney, Nebraska. We had a cemetery approximately almost identical, the same size as we have here, and there was 4 full-time staff members. Tom's doing that with himself and 1 other full-time, and then seasonal staff. So they're really good at what they do.
Councilman Beeler?
Additional comment. They definitely deserve better than the conditions they're working from right now. That's my opinion.
Okay. Moving on to forestry, a couple of big purchases to make a note of in 2026. We're looking at replacing a bucket truck, and in 2029, replacing a dump truck. Any question? Councilman Danforth.
Are you surprised to have a
I'm
question?
not.
On the equipment list, it lists the trolley. Do we still have the trolley?
We do still have the trolley, yes.
We do. And it's in the forestry department.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, well, because I haven't seen it, and actually I've had people ask me about that. I have no idea. I thought we had it, but
It made its way around town a few times this summer. We used it for Winterfest. It shuttled people around. I think
Yeah,
one of the
we-
challenges is finding drivers for it.
And we do have a driver, it's just, has not been a high demand. We used it recently for a park board tour of, some of our facilities, so, it does see limited use.
so I do have one question on the bucket truck. A couple years ago, probably 2 years, maybe 3 years now, we bought some type of big, expensive, I don't know what you even want to call it.
Grapple
Grapple
truck?
saw,
Grapple saw, is that what it is?
yeah.
That's not what you're referring to here,
No,
correct?
no, that is a different piece of equipment. That grapple saw has independent arms that, can grab a limb and, cut it and what have you. A regular bucket saw is used for different removals, trimming, and, it's serves a different purpose. There are certain things, certain trees that you cannot simply do with that grapple saw, just during safe removals.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that. I thought that was the case, but I didn't know for sure. Thank you.
Councilman Beeler.
Yes, it is me again. That's a question, just curiosity. The stump grinder, I know we have a lot of private folks that do stump grinding because I've had it done at my house a few times. Would it make sense to lease or to outsource that versus buy something?
I believe we did outsource some of that this year, and we will probably continue to do so. But from a, cost effectiveness, the having our own stump grinder and being able to do that quickly and efficiently, for example, after a lot of the removals and a lot of catch-up work, to be real honest, we had nearly 600 stumps to grind, and we're down to less than 100, I believe, right now. And that's just, this team has been very efficient, getting out there, getting after it. They know the areas that they removed, so they can go back to those without a lot of explanation to contractors and lining, there's some efficiencies with having that. That's not to say that we have not outsourced some of that. So, we did, particularly in this case, because there was such a backlog, that we did go ahead and spend some of that money, I believe.
Councilman Tupper.
This is more of a compliment, I guess, Director Roddick. The forestry department you definitely did a great job of turning that around. I mean, we have definitely seen the total difference between night and day in the last year. They're doing a terrific job out there, so I just want to give you and your staff a personal thank you on that. So,
Thank you. I really can't take credit for that. We did a great hire when we hired the forestry supervisor out of Brookings. So I'd worked with him down there, and I was excited that we were able to make that hire up here.
well, pass that word on to him then.
I will,
because,
thank you.
And your staff, because no matter how good a director you got, you still got to run the staff.
I'm not
and
the
you
one
couldn't do
cutting the
without it.
trees, so.
All right. Moving on to the library, there are no significant capital purchases outside of the normal book and equipment rotation. Questions about the library? No? All right, we will move on to our special revenue funds. The first one up is Park and Rec Golf. So, I don't know who's laughing at something out there? I don't know what's going on. Anyway, okay, in 2027, we see some greens and tee alignment. T sign replacement in 2028, some course renovations, big one in 2029, which is the irrigation replacement, and some additional course renovations in 29. I think Director Rodick can speak to any details you might need.
Councilman Bueller?
Thank you. Parks and Rec Director Rodick, I hear a lot from the public about a new clubhouse. And I don't know what thought we've given to that. I don't know where that's at. I'm not making light of it. I think it's something at some point we probably need to definitely consider. But I do hear a lot about that. I don't know about the rest of my fellow councilmen here, but
Those 10-year plans that I talked about,
Yeah.
Park and Rec is one of them. I believe it's scheduled in Dusty's year 8.
Yeah, I believe that's 8 years out, at least right now. And again, I don't even recall, I'd have to look exactly what number I put on that, but that's really a placeholder at this point. As city manager alluded to before, I have that, again, I just keep a 10-year to try and forecast some of those things, and knowing there's some priorities that the city is trying to work through right now with the street facility and possible city hall and other things, that it's in the 10-year plan, so we don't lose track of that. And I don't believe our public would let us lose track of that. But again, planning for it, but just have it out there a little ways.
be nice to have before I'm in assisted living.
Will that be happening before year 8? I will take that under consideration.
We'll get it before we go back to the cemetery topic. How about that? Councilman Danforth?
Maybe we could save him a little money and bury him underneath the new, anyway.
Mayor, you've lost control.
I know.
It's,
Actually, I like the comments. Right?
Well, he's just kind of like a Debbie Downer today. But anyway, Finance Officer Bob Zing, I got a question for you. We have our enterprise funds, which I understand what those are. What is a special revenue fund, and how does that differ? Because it's in its own category. What is that? And then I have a follow-up on Bruce's comment.
Okay, so a special revenue fund, general fund, all of its revenue, the majority comes from taxes. We're allowed to create what is called special revenue funds, and they're kind of a mixture of self-funding, but yet they take a lot of the transfers from the general fund essentially. Whereas an enterprise is supposed to act more like a business where it makes its revenues to cover its expenditures. So essentially, special revenues can charge fees. That's why you see your fees for your programs, for the golf course, for the pool. So it's kind of a combination between those two is what's considered a special revenue.
Okay. Back to the question, I too have had a number of comments, as Mr. Bueller has, and Mayor, you may as well, as you golf quite a bit as well. So I know that's been on the a replacement and actually a whole kind of resetting of that campus, so to speak, out there has kind of always been on the agenda there. But one of the questions I got is, I was in there earlier this summer, and there were very nice selection of 5-gallon pails kind of scattered all over in there. Does the roof need repair, or what is it that's creating that problem?
I had that conversation, actually, I believe it was last week, with the golf course staff. And, at the time, there weren't any 5-gallon buckets. It seems like there may be, or at least the possibility it might be HVAC related. Some of the HVAC units, I believe, are maybe in the attic and creating some condensation. I did ask Levi to look into that further, and let's, remedy that. We have some dollars that we've carried over from the CIP last year. I said, if, we get a contractor in here, let's get that taken care of.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director, I have a question. What is green tea realignment?
I'm glad you asked. The staff has identified a couple of different holes where we may move tees, or, greens are very expensive to move, but if you can realign your tees, and there may be some cases where a green may have to be shifted, just for playability, safety, things like that. This fall, we have Kevin Norby, who is a golf course architect, scheduled to come out and do a site assessment, and I did something similar to this in Brookings, and really just give us kind of a game plan related to course improvements. Won't get that deep into the weeds, but just identify from a professional standpoint what areas should have additional tee pads, or should a tee box be realigned? Should a green be expanded? Something along those lines. So, again, not having that plan in place yet, I did put some things in there related to that, what I anticipate coming out of that plan, having gone through that process with the course we had in Brookings. So I know what the final product will be. I just don't know the specifics of that at the moment.
Before I go to Councilman Danforth, I'll just say, put in my plug to just blow up number 9 red. Councilman Danforth?
You having a hard time hitting that green? Is that just,
Yeah.
Dusty, I got a question for you, because I hear a lot. I don't golf over there as much as I used to, but I've heard a lot about problems with the irrigation system out there all summer, all kinds of problems. I'm not sure that's true, because some people can make that sound as good or as bad as they want. But I'm assuming, from what I at least have seen a little bit, that there is probably some type of a reasonably significant problem out there. And so my point is that without water, the rest of that really doesn't matter. And because it takes up an equipment expense and a lot of our people's time to sit there, be digging them up and fixing. So why do we have the irrigation replacements? And I'm assuming that's not a complete irrigation, that's just some area. Why is that so far down the list versus this realignment thing?
Partially, well, and the plan we will get back from our golf course architect will help prioritize that a little better. Visiting with the staff, the largest issue that we had this year with our irrigation is, to be quite frankly, it wasn't blown out properly last year. We had a transition in staff, and it just simply wasn't winterized properly. So we spent a lot of the year just trying to repair things that broke when they froze. Visiting with our ground superintendent out there now, his biggest concern is on the control panel on our pumps, and we're going to look at that. And I don't recall if that's in this next year's budget, but that may be something that we can work through. Again, if we have, we still have some carryover money. If we can purchase that through that carryover money, let's spend the money that's already been allocated for that. That's the biggest concern right now.
Is that what this dollar amount is, or what?
That is not that dollar amount. That is as much a placeholder as, I don't recall if it's blue, red, or yellow, system that needs to start getting replacement down the road. But our biggest concern would be that pump panel and the electronics in that, and then we'll look down the road, starting to replace main lines and things like that.
So is some of that in the departmental non-capital budgets for that, or?
For that pump panel?
I'm sorry, I didn't have my mic on.
For that pump panel?
For the concerns you expressed, are they in here somewhere then?
What I had mentioned, we will probably try and take care of that through some of the money that we've carried over from last year, the year before, that did not get spent. Again, there was money allocated for this year that we did not spend that entire amount, because we were kind of wanting to, before we just spend money, we wanted to put a plan in place So we're spending that systematically and in the right priority.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anything else on that? Okay, moving on to the Aquatic Center. The big capital purchase you'll see in 2029 is replacement of the playground. Otherwise, pretty standard system updates. The field house and auditorium, we're looking at an LED conversion. I'm assuming this is in the field house.
Correct.
In 2025, and a new divider / curtain netting in 2026 at the field house also. Questions on that? I see you have I can tell when you have a question. Councilman Danforth.
We've had this conversation about the auditorium for a lot of years, and I'm not familiar how we establish its value to us. I know there's expenses associated to it, and I've always heard that there are some coming pretty major expenses that probably need to be done. As we move towards the completion of the new ice arena, which opens up the Mace building, what does that do for us? I don't see anything in this plan about what happens to that building when we get into the new ice arena, and then, because it somewhat correlates a little bit to, potentially anyway, where we're at and what we do with an auditorium. So anyway, is that a forever building? I mean, does it add value to us that it's worthy of putting that money back into it and keeping that, or what are the thoughts on that?
As a part of the park master plan, we had asked our consultants to evaluate both the current ice arena and the auditorium for just basically give us a, ballpark cost estimate on some of the major repairs that would be required for the auditorium. So we at least start to have a number to work with. And, along the same lines, what it might take from a budget standpoint to convert the existing ice arena. I don't know how to pronounce it either, so that's how I describe it, to a different use. Whether that is a field house, whether that is, any number of different options at this point. That's kind of the direction we've gone. So purposely, there was nothing in this plan at this point because we simply wanted to gather some more information.
I'd have to remember, but I've met George, and he always referred to himself as Mace, if that helps. But
It does, but I'll forget.
Yeah.
So the current ice arena is also how I refer to it.
all right.
Okay. One note on the auditorium, one of the challenges with that building is it is on the historic registry. And so any modifications, changes, things like that, we need to be cognizant of that recognition. Doesn't mean you can't do things with it, but it certainly makes it a little more challenging.
Do a joke that Councilman Tupper leaned over and said, "How does the auditorium work for a salt sand storage?"
It's like building an East Side Fire Station on the West Side. I mean, you just make it work, right?
We can
Okay,
be creative.
moving on to Park and Recreation, the zoo. So some of the larger capital items here in 2026, we have updates to both the aquariums and the cat habitats. In 2027, we're looking to construct a tiger complex. 2028, update the primate triplex, and in 2029, construction of a penguin habitat.
I may jump in if I could. These things were part of the existing strategic plan that was done for the zoo. Please keep in mind that we're actually scheduling a new version of a strategic plan to check the box for AZA accreditation and everything else. You'd like to see an updated strategic plan. So we anticipate going through that process, or at least some portion of a strategic planning process. So some of these may or may not be in the same order, or, or even stand the test of a new plan. So, but this was the information we had available at the time, so that's what it was included.
Did you have something, Councilman Danforth?
Every budget year, I express the same concerns I have the previous 8 years on the council, and now this is my, third one again on here, is the cost that we are supplementing the budget for the zoo. It's a great asset, but it is taking a lot of resources. It's taking a lot of financial resources, and if we can do it, and that's what the community wants, and that's what this body wants, but I continue to have that concern that our funding of that, it keeps increasing both operationally and capital-wise, and our revenues just aren't tracking at all. That's a concern, and I know I had a previous council member that thought I hated otters. I really don't.
How do you feel about penguins?
And I will say that Assistant Fire Chief Youngblood, if he's here tomorrow, needs to bring donuts because his phone went off, by the way. So, yeah. So anyway, that's just a general concern I have. It's a great asset. But, a number of years ago, Sioux Falls we're drawing a line and forced an issue of a funding plan outside of the city of Sioux Falls. And I'm not suggesting that, but I think we got to look at it and say, where's our tolerance here? It really is.
I share some of the same sentiments. And as we have a great relationship with the Lake Area Zoological Society, and we've actually had some preliminary conversations on just how things are structured, and is this the right way? And they support those operations really well with some of their fundraising and what have you. There's some opportunities for the future which could potentially significantly decrease the amount of subsidy from the city. But again, some of that is going to be through fundraising, through simply an endowment to help support the operations of the zoo. I would agree it is a great asset to the community, just even within the park master plan, some of the initial survey results. It's one of the highest used sites, in the community. So, but know that we're looking at ways to make that as affordable as we possibly can.
Councilman Tupper?
I guess this doesn't really have anything to do with the budget. Yes, it does, because we're talking about master plan. When do we expect to see the results of the whole master plan?
Thank you. I've referenced that a couple of times. Actually, I believe it's next week. The park board meets, and we're going to have a meeting to go over the preliminary some of the preliminary findings of the survey, the community survey. So that's in the process. With that, they're going to have some preliminary recommendations based on that. It's far from a complete plan. I would like to see that plan wrapped up, ideally before the end of the year. Ideally, it would have been nice to have some of that information before, budgeting.
Yeah.
But there was some delays in that. But hopefully by the end of the year.
Did you see good response from the public?
We did, particularly on the
Statistically valid survey.
statistically valid part. They were hoping for a minimum of like 350 responses, and I think they got over 450 or in that range.
That's great to hear.
Which is good. I was a little disappointed in the general survey that anybody going to take online. We didn't have as many responses in that as I had hoped, but at least we got what we needed for the statistically valid information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that meeting is 5:30 next Tuesday, or a week from today. about at this time. And then also just wanted to mention one thing about the zoo. I know that there are limitations on what we as a city and the Park and Rec Department can do, in part because it's out of our control. I won't say that the goalposts keep changing on a national and international level, but they keep forcing to keep our accreditation, they keep forcing higher and higher standards, and we keep meeting them, but the cost goes up with every increased standard significantly. And I know that that is the problem that other communities have had. And a small community with a vibrant and well-attended zoo faces those problems as well. And I just want to explain that to some of the people who might not know.
Okay. All right. The Ice Arena Expo, we do have in 2026 to replace the current Zamboni. You'll remember that we purchased a new electric one for the Prairie Lakes Ice Arena, and we were planning to take the existing one over to the new space as well, and this is a replacement of the existing one. Any questions on that? Okay. Park Systems, you'll see a new sprayer unit in 2026, a skid steer in 2027, and wide area mower in 29, and a tractor replacement in 29. Any questions there? Okay. City Park, no significant capital purchases planned other than the typical campground amenities. Prairie Lakes Wellness Center, a couple of big ones here in 2025. We are looking to replace the pool HVAC units, and in 2029, the general HVAC rooftop units. And I can let our Park and Rec director give a little more detail on that if you like.
I think we would like.
And I actually may ask Teresa Hillis, our Wellness Center Superintendent, to help fill in some of these gaps. She's done a lot of research on this. This would be one of those items that the replace pool HVAC that we would likely request pre-authorization to get in the queue for that, so that, you know, if you guys approve that, that we can replace that in a logical schedule to have a minimal disruption to operations. But essentially, Teresa has put together at least 14 pages worth of documentation trying to track the history of the failure of some of those units, and, you know, who's been talked to and when they've been talked to, and some of the proposed solutions, and continue to have issues with those units just as a stopgap for this upcoming season, or let's say just within the past 6 months, we've noticed that when the humidity levels get high, it changes the pressure inside the building, and has caused some, let's say, expansion of some of the roof fabric, just from the change in pressure, you know, leaking through areas in the ceiling or what have you. You know, not quite a Metrodome scenario, but, you know, along those same lines. So the recommendation is, and again, we last fall, I believe, we had conversation with Johnson Controls. They had kind of given us that number, and that's what we based on. There likely may be a little bit of inflation on that, but we will do our due diligence before we come back and ask for pre-authorization. We'll have a real number at that point, but it's going to be in that range. You know, there was some, if you do this, then you don't have to do that, and so we got to identify what those best options are. But any more specific questions, I can let Teresa handle some of that.
I know Councilman Danforth and I talked about this the other day. I would welcome Teresa if she wanted to come up and talk more about it. And I know Councilman Danforth has questions about it now. It almost, to the extent that I understand it, it was almost the reverse Metrodome. Instead of imploding, it was threatening to explode.
Yeah.
So, Teresa, do you want to come on up? Councilman Danforth, go ahead.
Well, Councilman Bueller and I were significantly involved in the efforts to work through the design, construction, and opening of that facility. Because I believe, if I am correct here, I think, didn't we open in March of 16? Wasn't it March, I think, or of 2016?
17,
17? So
7 years.
we're 6 years into this, and we got 6.5 years, and we've got $1 million, $1.1 million deal here. As somebody that was heavily involved in that, I'm not sure what the process that you have used or what you plan to use, but I would put all the troops together, and I would get the architect down here, and I would get the engineering company that did the work on this up here, because I think they were out of Sioux Falls, and I'd get the manufacturer of the equipment, because this is unacceptable. And all of these items were engineered and recommended to us, and if they aren't working, then we need to take it right to the sources, and that is at least those three entities. And if you have those discussions, I'd like to be a part of it, because we were a part of it. We had those discussions way back when. So I'm not sure where Councilman Bueller is, but this is completely unacceptable from my standpoint, that we're 6 years into a $24 million building, and we got to have $1 million major replacement like this. It might, when the dust settles, we may be just right where we are today, but I know I'll feel better.
City Manager Mack?
Haven't had that discussion, so.
And I'll let our superintendent speak a little more. Point number one, the manufacturer of the units has gone out of business. We have done significant work over the last several months, well, almost year, since Teresa has been in her position. We've done exactly what you've requested. We've met with the architects, we've met with the engineers. We've had the, our friends at Tegra, who were the owner's rep on that project. Without, casting any dispersions, it appears we got a lemon. And we're outside of the warranty. There is not a simple fix to just get it by. And we can certainly send out the narrative that Teresa has put together. It is incredibly comprehensive. And if you'd like us to do additional, research and conversations, we absolutely can do that. But it is, it is our recommendation that they need to be replaced. We've had outside engineers, we've had city engineers, we've had architects, we've had Johnson Controls there, we've had, who else? Active Heating, all of the local subcontractors have been out to look at it, and the recommendation remains the same from all of them, that they should be replaced. It is unfortunate, and I can't speak to how or why, or maybe they weren't malfunctioning or not working properly during the warranty period, and we just didn't know. Maybe we missed an opportunity to have them come back and address it during the warranty period, but we are out of that now. So it is our responsibility to figure it out. There may be another solution, but I don't know what that would be. And you can share more information if you like.
The Ceresco air handling units are a very complicated pool system. They're based on glycol, which a lot of the air handling systems for pool RTOs, rooftop units, are not. This was kind of maybe a very complicated, we might have gotten the new version that came out when we purchased it. I think it was a great system, and it never really performed. We've heard feedback that the Ceresco units have a lifespan without complications of just 10 years. So when you look at one that has been having problems since practically day one, I think the majority of the time, we had very short warranties for these systems too as well. And at the beginning, when we were having leaks, a lot of the assumption was that they were roof leaks, and it took a long time to figure out that it wasn't leaks on the roofs. In fact, I think it was actually one of the systems that had so much leaks it caused a collapse of the ceiling in the wellness center that you might remember, is when they realized that there were problems with that. They had a group that came out to try and fix it, because once again, the place went out of business, and they tried to fix it, which the council authorized funds for. This is all in the report too. But they finally said, we're not going to charge you. We put all this work in. We just can't guarantee it. That's how bad the system was. So basically, there's a lot of problems with it, with air handling quality. The pressure system is just the latest of that, and we're constantly putting money into it. The fix for the air pressurization, we got a quote, and it's about $22,000 just for this year. I think what you're going to see is a system that usually going out at 10 years, and one that we're having so much problems before we hit 7, is that we could have a failure of the system where it all together goes down. And these systems are not like a hot tub or a men's sauna where it just takes a couple of months to put in place. It takes about 1.5 years to put in place. And so we could go ahead and play the weight game and see it go down. And if it goes down, you'll lose the entire pool, including the hot tub, and all the folks that use that. Swim team, lap swimmers, aqua aerobics, swim lessons, only year-round swim lessons that we have in this community. So you would see a severe impact on the membership and the programs and the people that serve. We generally run, right now, we're at our highest membership ever, close to 7,000 people use the Wellness Center, and a large proportion of them use the pool. So we would also see a membership impact if the pool went down too as well. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, and once again, there's a huge report where I tried to the best of my ability to kind of go back in time. But it is a system that we are running on I feel like it's like a mouse running on the wheel, and I don't know if the mouse is going to make it.
Go ahead, follow up.
I want you to understand, I'm not faulting anybody from our team here.
Oh, no.
I'm just damn disappointed
I am too.
that we pay good money to architects and engineers, and then we end up with something like this. I know the old saying, stuff happens, right? This is extremely disappointing that we're at this point. And I don't question that we need to do something. And it sounds like you guys have done the groundwork that needs to be done at, I don't know from a legal sense if there's any other recourse, a lemon law, whatever. But I'm disappointed to hear that. And if you would be kind enough to maybe email, at least me anyway, your report, I'd like to read that and go through that.
Yeah, we'll send that out to the whole council, and I think Dusty can attest. I think I told him at least 4 times, go back and find a different solution. So we certainly internally. 5 times. Internally don't like to have to make this recommendation either for a lot of the same reasons, but also $1 million is a significant amount of money that but it could be used elsewhere.
Councilman Beeler?
Thank you, Mayor. I was involved, because I was the Park and Rec liaison. I still am the Park and Rec liaison. And this goes back a couple of years now, I think, is when the system got to the point where we really needed to take a serious look and make some changes. And at that point in time, I think it was $60-some thousand, which at that time I thought was ridiculous because we were only a few years into that system. I do think that we had maybe dropped the ball a little bit as far as monitoring that system early on while it was still in warranty. I think there should have maybe been, some of that should have been recognized earlier on. I hope in the future, and I'm sure we will, under Teresa's guidance, I'm sure, keep an eye on those things, because that is a huge issue. I've looked at this every which way but sideways, and I know Teresa's sick of talking to me about it and in the Park and Rec. But it is disappointing. It really is. But unfortunately, it's beyond the warranty. It's something we're going to have to do, and it would be catastrophic, I believe, if that system goes down completely, it could be detrimental to the facility itself, the building itself, you know, as well as maybe, who knows, maybe a year's worth of downtime on the pool. And so I think, unfortunately, I think we just don't have a choice but to bite the bullet and make this expenditure to get this right. And I hope that in the future that we monitor this better so that we are sure that we don't have issues under the warranty. But I've been back and forth on this thing for the last 2-3 years, whatever the hell it was. But it's, yeah, I don't see a remedy at this point other than making those replacements.
To speak to your point about monitoring, you may recall that several months ago, we asked the council to approve an agreement with an outside agency to perform commissioning at the ice arena. And that's exactly what they do. They go through all of these systems to make sure that they're right-sized. So it's one thing to get them installed, but then once they're operating, we want to make sure that they're operating the way that they're intended to operate, and two, our people know how to run them. So the lesson is duly noted, especially for the new facility. But when we do replace these, that'll be, part of the program too, is to make sure that we know how to operate them. And unfortunately, again, I do think it just a lemon system. Everyone did everything right. You thought you're getting the latest and greatest, which is what you want in a brand new facility, and it just didn't work in our favor.
Manager Mack, Superintendent Hillis, can we even make it until 2025?
We don't have a choice.
We can't get one until 2025.
Oh.
I mean, the lead time, much like ambulances and fire trucks. So as we mentioned, we'll be requesting authorization to get our name on the list and fully commit those funds in 2025, but they won't be here until then.
Find another solution. Let's find one from another
Number
community.
6, right?
Yeah.
Go back. I feel like we just
There's got to be a similar building that we can go in the nighttime and
Swim.
and pilfer from the
Councilman Bueller.
Back to the lake.
back to the lake.
If I might, I just thought, and I'm not sure that this is available. I know that, in some instances, if you need air conditioning in large facilities, you can actually lease very large chillers. I don't know if they make any of this type of equipment that could be leased in the event that this thing goes, that could work, that would have to come in externally. I actually worked for a company that built chillers the size of a semi truck, and they would do these but I don't know if they have specialized equipment for doing that, but it might be worth looking at.
I could certainly research that, but I've been working in facilities at YMCA's for over 30 years, and I've never seen anything that they've been able to substitute for air handling units in these systems. It's really complicated in a pool environment, where you have a little bit more flexibility in a regular building, but a pool environment is very complicated with all the chemicals swirling around. Rust, humidification, chlorine.
All right, thank you.
Well, that was very much like the Metrodome and deflated the whole room. Very sorry for that.
Sorry.
Let's move on to something maybe a little more exciting. Street system improvements. Yeah, you get excited about that. All right, so this is a special revenue fund, our capital improvement sales tax fund. You'll remember that the second penny all goes into the 212 fund. The pavement management program, you also will remember, we've had some presentations on that. This is the rating and ranking of all of our streets and conditions, and that's how it helps us budget. What you have in front of you are the mill and overlay, street reconstructs, large patch rehabilitations, and pavement rehab, crack, chip, and fog sealing. Over the next 5 years, we anticipate spending just a little over $37 million on pavement management program street improvements. Any specific questions about that?
Councilman Schutte?
Thank you, Mayor. Of course, this isn't set in stone, so this is all subject to change as far as which roads, because something could change in a year on a particular road or.
Yeah, as we learned this year with, the winter conditions, and when we get into spring, there were, things that we thought could be a little lower on the list that we had to move up.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilman Danforth?
Ms. Mack, we had, I think last year, I think in the 2023 budget, we had moved more dollars over into this than we have previously been doing. And I think, as we head into 2024, how does, if we look back at the, 2021 or 2022, the dollars that equate to what's referenced here year by year, how does that look in comparison to what 23 is going to ultimately look like, what we're budgeting for 24, and what these numbers here as we look out as a percentage looking back at the date when we said, okay, we got to put more into our roads? Are we typically running 10% more funding towards it? Is there just a reference number? Because I think that's important. I mean, this previous council and this council have made a firm commitment to putting more funding towards our streets. And I think it's important that we communicate that because the public oftentimes just sees the potholes, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we communicate the actual dollars and the increases that we've made to support this type of project.
Okay. I guess I can talk a little bit to the past. I would say probably from 2020 and previous, I would say we were probably averaging about 2 million was like the tops. That was where we're going. Then after 2020, we did slowly start to move up. I believe in 23, we were hitting right around, was it 4 million after we dumped in the extra million?
It was 5.5
Yeah.
after the.
Yeah, we're at 5.5 in 23.
So, and now you can see with the next budgets. But yeah, I would say from about that 2020 and previous, it was 2 million was about, and some years it was like 1.7. So when we got to the 2 million, I think we decided to look at that more, so.
Just one point of clarification. This is the pavement management work. There's also non-pavement management work that's, about 2.5 million over the next 5 years. So that does factor into all of the road work that gets done. It's just two different systems. But Director Von Eyck can give you much more detail.
I can't, this happens to be a portion of what my master's degree was based on, was pavement management. I don't know how in depth we want to get tonight, but I could talk all night about it if you wanted, Mayor.
How about 5 minutes?
Okay. No, all joking aside, the pavement management program, the study data that we have is really what we've used to drive our budgets. And there's actually funding recommendations in that study. We've talked about this before. I know I've visited one-on-one with Councilman Schutte about this, how in that pavement management study, if you spend X dollars, it puts the trajectory of our pavement condition index in a certain trajectory. If you spend another Y million dollars, it puts it on this trajectory. And generally speaking, that helps guide what we're budgeting every year, depending on where we want our average condition index to be. So back when I started in 2018, to Kristen's point, we were spending about $2 million, 2 to 2.5, as I recall, between 2018 and 2019 on pavement management specific road work. These numbers here are the projects that specifically increase that pavement condition index. There's a list of other projects that we'll talk about later that don't have anything to do with that pavement condition index. But these projects specifically make the road condition better and increase those numbers. And so we've broken our CIP plan out for the street rehab and repair into those categories so that we can better track what we're spending to increase the pavement condition. Since 2018, we've added, I think, about $500,000 a year on average. We went to 3, then 3.5, 4, 4.5, and now we're pushing right around 5.5 this year, I think, with that additional million that we added. And I look over my shoulder to Assistant City Engineer Peterson. I want to give him a lot of credit for, he's really taken the reins on building this CIP, he and I together, and working with how this is laid out. But this number, like take 2025 at 6.4, that's a very good number as far as that study is concerned. That will put us on a trajectory to increase our pavement condition index average from, I believe it's at 64. If we trend at this 6 number over the next 5 years, we'll be pushing 70 some as an average pavement condition index. And that's a pretty good number to be attaining if we're able to hold these numbers.
Councilman Shetty?
You just answered my question. So yeah, where does that push us on the scale? And so getting into the 70s, the average, national average, I believe, is in the low 60s or something.
It is, yeah.
In school, that meant a D as far as.
We grade on a curve in city government.
So I do appreciate your work on this to get this to we can get, above average. In the 70s would be nice. And so, yeah, appreciate it.
Councilman Beeler, did you have something? Okay. I would like to say personally thank you to City Manager Mack, Director Von Eye, Finance Officer Bob Zine, Engineer Peterson, everyone involved in this. Years ago when I first came on the council, far and away the #1 complaint that I got was always potholes. And year after year, especially since coming on with this council and as mayor, I've got to say, I no longer think that potholes is the #1 complaint I hear. I think the #1 complaint I hear now is who's going to live in all the apartments that we're building. Quickly followed by, I can't even get across town because there's so much construction going on. Seriously, I'm not lying. And that is, granted, yes, it's us voting for that budget, but it's you proposing that budget because in the end, the value of the government is the old saying, put your money where your mouth is. So if you're talking that roads are a priority, then fund them properly. And you can see the increase. You can see how much money we are spending more than ever before in Watertown and the commitment that we have going forward. And I hope that the public sees this because this literally is putting the money that we have into the #1 resource that the community uses on a daily basis. And I want them to notice that and understand the work that you and your team are doing and the council is voting for. Councilman Danforth?
As I look at the numbers up there, the one thing that intrigues me, and we should all be, I think, proud of it, is that we've seen it in the past where we just do a shot in the arm, kind of a one-time deal, and we feel good about ourselves. Granted, this can change one way or the other, but this shows an ongoing commitment, and I think that's important. It's not that one-time shot where we go out and we do something to try to improve it. But so I think that's a really good thing, and I hope the public sees that and can appreciate that. I do have a question. We've always talked about the, what's the word I want to use? The lack of availability of companies to come in and to do our street work because we don't do much of it ourselves, right? Most of it's contract. Have we seen that change? I mean, if we're spending 5.5 in 2023 versus 2, so obviously we've had a lot more work done. Are we seeing the resources to get the work done? Are they growing? Are they coming?
Yeah, Councilman Danforth, the results we're seeing on our bids for our street work are, I would say, adequate. They could always be more competitive. Sometimes we'll only get one bidder, and that's all right. We appreciate that one bidder. If we wouldn't have that one bidder, at times some of this work wouldn't happen. Sometimes we'll only have 2 bidders, maybe 3 at best, depending on the project and what's going on with it. I'd say the biggest issue we're having with any of our work is the concrete work, where we have not been able to fulfill our miscellaneous concrete repair project the last, I think, 2 years in a row now. We just simply can't get the concrete contractors to bid on it, whether that's due to their availability. I'm sure that's part of it, and the schedules that they're running. But the road work, the asphalt work, we're able to get contractors, and we're glad we're able to get the ones we do receive.
Councilman Beeler?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say, I think one of the comments that I get quite often, opposed to maybe what Reed was saying, was road issues, people complaining about roads. But I got to say, I think we've done a bang-up job. I think we've done a really, really good job this year with all the stuff that we've done for roads this year. I think's been great. Just want to say that. So pass that on to your staff.
Councilman Tupper?
I only got one question. Are they going to get them all done yet this year?
Short answer is not quite. No, we will be extending some of our contracts into next year.
16th Avenue.
That's one. That's one of them. Correct.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay. We will move on to non-pavement management work, bridges and structures, and storm sewer and drainage. You'll see again another 2.4 million in non-pavement management work, which again is, as Director Vaughn and I talked about, is the miscellaneous concrete, it's parking lot rehabs, alley rehabs, things of that nature. Bridges and structures outside of the 500,000 that we're planning for in 2025 for the city's share of the 14th Avenue Bridge replacement project. It's pretty standard annual bridge inspection costs. And again, that 500,000 is only our responsibility if the county receives the big grant. Oh, they have. They've been awarded that. And then into the storm sewer and drainage systems, again, very systematic dollars there year over year for drainage improvements and sump pump collection systems. Questions on that? Okay. Moving on. So the next page in your budget book is related to the industrial park and other infrastructure. No significant expenditures out of there. Recreational facility improvements. You'll see the total expenditures year over year are just a little over $6 million. The details are in your packet. We can certainly visit about any of those that you would like to specifically. A lot of trail improvements. You'll see some kayak trails, basketball courts, new park development in a few of the years. These are just your very systematic facility improvements.
Manager Mack, what does new park development entail?
I'll let our Park and Rec Director answer that for you.
Thank you.
Turn your mic on.
Okay, thank you. That was placed in there, again, similar to, I had mentioned earlier that we were hoping that we would have had the park master plan in place. Some of the other things that are in there, maybe things that will come out of that park master plan, but that item specifically was just left very general once we get additional direction from that plan, but it's more of a placeholder at this point, if that helps.
Councilman Danforth?
Thank you. Talk about a topic that I get a lot of comments and questions on, and also has caused me significant injury and pain, and that's pickleball. I haven't seen anything in here in regards to pickleball. Am I missing it, or is there work? Because I just saw something, I think, maybe yesterday or the day before, about a grant, I think, coming out of the Community Foundation for the pickleball group. But where is that at?
Yes, sir, that's tomorrow evening.
We're getting it tomorrow?
No, we're going to talk about it tomorrow. It is in the 2024
Oh, it is in there?
budget.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
All right.
Director Roddick, question for you. I'm seeing like basketball courts, tennis courts for the sum of 25, 30,000. That's just like taking care of.
Right, that's resurfacing.
I see in 2026 campground drainage. Is that out at City Park?
Yes.
Is that pursuing like your idea of trying to make it so that all of the sites are not flooded every spring?
Right, we
Yeah.
do have some money, I believe, still in this year's budget that I'd asked the staff, let's get a hold of some engineers to look at developing, at least a plan, or at least see if that's feasible at this point.
And just for the public who might not know, Director Roddick identified that as a need in the community because every spring it floods and sometimes it can last for months where that campground is useless. And he just came up with the idea of let's make it so that it's not useless. To figure out a way to drain it.
Hopefully, yeah.
Councilman Tupper?
I do have a question. Kayak trail. Isn't that a river?
It is. And, again, some of these we just had some help with from Game Fish and Parks, put another access down on Hanton Park. So that, again, that work happened after I prepared this, but there's other opportunities for other kayak, canoe access along, the stretch of river that we're fortunate to have run through and, could develop just a really neat amenity. Again, some of that, if we really wanted to expand that, we may have to negotiate with some landowners, between the lake and, city itself. So again, I don't have anything structured in place right now. Again, I want to see how that comes through the park master plan, but I just thought it would be an interesting opportunity for this community that not every community would have the ability to have.
So it'd be more landing, stuff like that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The E911 fund, again, no significant capital purchases are planned. So we'll move on to our public enterprise funds. And here we have Public Works Department, our wastewater collections division. You'll see a new dump body, 6-inch pumps, a jetter truck in 2028, and a pickup with plow in 2029. And as our finance officer mentioned earlier, the definition of an enterprise fund is essentially they pay their own way. So they cover the costs of their personnel and equipment through user fees and rates. Any questions about that? I feel like you might have a question, Councilman Danforth. I was right. One
No, actually, I
I'd say don't solicit.
want to give everyone an opportunity.
I'm going to pass. I was having a thought, but it actually wasn't about this.
Oh,
So-
okay. All right, moving on to the collection system improvements. And we're looking at, again, just general annual improvements, about $330,000 a year for a total of $1.3 million. And this is sewer replacement and rehab throughout our system. Questions on that? Okay. Moving on, the treatment facility, two of the big things in 2027, we're looking at the digester rehab project, and in 2028, looking at a new tractor and broom mower. Okay. Industrial pretreatment, very exciting stuff. No significant capital purchases planned there. And then we'll move on to the laboratory, or as my children would call it, the laboratory. No significant capital purchases planned for the lab either. And moving on to solid waste, in 2028, we are anticipating 2 new automated trucks for a total of $800,000. Any questions on that? We are. Oh, go
Councilman
ahead.
Tupper?
I know we've been waiting for some of those. Are we caught up on that? Did we receive those yet, or?
No, not yet. We're still
But those aren't falling into this budget, right? They're already budgeted for.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Moving on to the disposal side, in 2025, we are looking at a new compactor for 1.5 million. 2026 is cell number 8 for 1.6 million, and in 2029, a new landfill scale for just a little over 120,000. Councilman Danforth.
On that note, on a scale, can those things be, what makes a scale go bad?
Well,
I
when
mean,
I get
I
on
know
mine, I get a little angry at it,
My
so.
bathroom scale, what makes it
Right,
go bad? But
right.
What, are they something that can be reconditioned? The only reason why I bring that up is at some point in time, maybe we coincide that and get it reconditioned, and that's what goes over to the street department.
I don't have an answer for that. I don't know if you do, if we can look into it, see what the options are.
Councilman Shetty?
I did learn something with the solid waste. I brought some insulation out there one time, and it only weighs 20 pounds at a crack. It doesn't weigh it per pound. I got away with not having to pay for my insulation disposal because it didn't hit the mark, or didn't measure.
I hope your conscience feels good about that now. All right, moving on to recycling. In 2026, a new tanker truck. And in 2027, we're looking at a new automated yard waste truck. Any questions on that? Okay.
What does automated yard waste truck mean? As opposed to just a yard waste?
The
Oh,
arm.
okay, so,
is
yeah, so
automatic,
it's
yeah.
what we're used to.
Yes.
Okay.
All right,
Councilman Danforth?
oh, sorry.
Well, this dawned on me the other day. I actually took a large load of stuff out to the dump. And we do the, what do you call that? The leaves in the grass,
Compost?
composting.
Yeah.
What does that cost us in a year's time? That specific operation, what does that cost us? And is that beneficial to us to, seems like a lot of work. And
I do not have an
And I
answer
don't-
for you right now. He might, but I do not.
I don't have any exact costs, but again, that's information we can look up. I can go through Superintendent Mitchell, Acting Superintendent Craig Mitchell, and figure out what kind of costs that program has. I do know that it's one of those waste diversion type programs where it's a benefit to us to compost that material rather than bury it into our landfill. If we were to bury it into our landfill, of course, that takes up volume and space in our landfill cells, and then it increases the frequency on which we have to go dig and find a new cell and procure new land to bury more garbage. So it's one of those waste diversion programs that there is a cost to it, but there's also a lot of benefit to it, not only from the product that's used through the community, but also as a cost savings in the volume that you're not taking up in your landfill. But we can definitely research some costs.
Councilman Tupper?
Just a large portion of the recycling program, basically, is what it is. And the nice thing about that is we don't have to rely on a market for the compost. I mean, they do recycle it and give it back to the community in a way. So just another form of keeping the landfill from filling too early.
Okay. Airport, in 2025, we need to put in some new fencing around the fire training facility. That'll be about $80,000. Otherwise, the airport capital is pretty standard. We got a couple mowers in there. Questions about that?
If I could add, just a note, through transition, having a new airport manager, we don't have any vehicles listed on her yet. That's something that Manager Cyrus and I need to get together on, but there'll likely be some vehicle purchases sprinkled in this 5-year plan later on down the road here.
And then lastly, we have our airport improvement projects. In 2025, we are looking at Taxiway B and parallel Taxiway C, as well as the antenna relocation from the old terminal into the new space. 2026 is Taxiway A reconstruction. 2027 through 28 is replacing runway 1735 lights and signs. The total cost over those 5 years is $9.6 million. The city's share of that is $2,026,500. As you know, we, with the exception of the relocation of the antenna, we do cost share with the state and the federal government on those expenses. Any questions? Do you have a question? You're giving me the look. I don't know.
Just a curiosity question on the airport antenna. What is, I mean, I understand the rest of the stuff, but I didn't know we had a big antenna. But
It's not really that.
It's really not that big.
big, yeah. It's very
and-
costly though.
Yeah, and this is something that we have gone rounds with the FAA pre-new terminal. So they have to relocate the antenna that the FAA uses to conduct whatever business they're doing. Is currently housed at the old terminal. And it's got to be moved prior to demolition or deconstruction of the old terminal. That cost is entirely for the city to bear. So we thought, well, what if we just don't move it? We can't operate our airport. It has been, like I said, some significant conversations with the FAA. We've even involved our congressional delegation, and they are not moving on any sort of cost share with this thing. And it is expensive. It's you know, what, a lawn shed that they're going to house this thing in, basically, and this is what they're telling us it's going to cost.
Councilman Tupper?
$1.5 million just to move? This thing made out of crystal or what?
Yeah, it's the process that the FAA and the standards that they hold this level of work to that costs so much. I jokingly call it a lawn shed, and we're paying a lot of money for lawn, but it's obviously it's a little more than a lawn shed. It'll be like a block structure, a pre-engineered structure that's hauled into this site. Not uncommon or not unlike those that you see at the base of a big tower out in the middle of the countryside. Those types of structures. There's a lot of instrumentation and antennas within those buildings. That's a lot like what this thing will look like. But there's some underground work that goes with that, and then of course all of their instrumentation. You know, not just one antenna, but you know, racks of instrumentation and things that need to be relocated. But that process has to be inspected full-time by certain certified staff, and that is just one of the pieces of the puzzle here that make this cost go up and up. Hopefully that helps a little bit more context.
I can't be the only one wondering how much for a new one.
This is essentially, everything is essentially going to be brand new. So we call it a relocation, but really that's the impetus behind this work. We're taking the old tower and some of the equipment. Some of that will come with, but some of it, the building for sure will be new, the structure, and then the instrumentation racks and the things within the structure, all that'll be new. I believe they're reusing some of the components, as many as they can. That'd be up to the FAA to determine what they reuse or what is reusable.
Okay, that makes more sense than to me, because I was reading relocation as moving, and it's not. Would be more like akin to relocating City Hall. We're not just moving the building or moving the desks and stuff. Councilman Tupper?
Part of that's probably a little bit time sensitive because the old one can't be down while the new one's being, you know, so you can't take the old one and move it over there. And I'm sure there probably won't be a whole lot of the parts that they'll reuse just for those reasons, so.
Into that time sensitivity, we'll also be heavily coordinating with Lake Area Tech and their plans on the demo of that building. You know, when that happens, we need to be waiting the wings, pun intended there, to carry out this programming with the FAA. And
You have to bring donuts tomorrow for that.
make sure that everything is coordinated well in advance, because this stuff doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of planning on the FAA's end.
All right.
And that, my friends, concludes the presentation on the long-term capital plan for the city of Watertown, years 2025 through 2029. And we will certainly entertain any discussion and attempt to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Manager Mack. Thank you to your staff. Thank you to the council for a thorough discussion during the process, but I will open it up for more now. I'm not hearing any. All right, thank you, City Manager Mack.
Thank
Do
you,
we
Mayor.
have any announcements from the council? Other than we will see you back here tomorrow at 4 for the budget, City Manager's report.
I will update this presentation. I'll fix the couple of slides with errors and get it out to you all just so you have it. It's all in your packet, but if you'd like a copy of the presentation, I'll make sure it's cleaned up, and I do apologize for that.
Thank you. There's no reason to go into executive session, therefore the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Shetty. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, the motion is to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Good night and God bless you, Watertown.